We'll be talking about Indian removal in the United States. We will start really from the French and Indian War and really go to the Trail of Tears in 1838. Native Americans occupied North and South America long before the Europeans came to the Western Hemisphere, and I know that you guys know that. And I know that you would also look at this map and you will see several tribes that many of you actually did presentations on, and also, you know, the Aztecs and the Mayan and things like that. And you would also know that Columbus's first voyages went, again, right here where he came into contact with the Taino people. And again, you know that they have been here for hundreds, again, there's some evidence, even thousands of years. Most of the East Coast, you will see, is going to be explored by European countries, primarily England, who will establish the 13 colonies. And the English way, they're going to treat the Native Americans just like they treated the Irish. They will keep pushing them and pushing them westward. And really, there's going to be a premise that we're going to set up here, and it's going to hold throughout American history too. No matter what Native Americans did, they would still not be accepted by white culture. As you know, the colonies eventually broke from Great Britain and became the United States of America. And the population will grow, and it will continue to grow. And the colonists, or I'm sorry, Americans, will take over the same mentality they had as colonists. They're going to keep pushing westward until then there's no more territory for Native Americans to go to. And you will see that fighting will occur over clashes over land. Now, who started it first? Obviously, we have the hindsight to know that Europeans were encroaching on Native American land. But when it becomes personal and you're a settler, you don't necessarily know and say, oh, well, you were here first, we weren't. So it becomes personal, and fighting happens literally constantly. There are things in newspapers. You see that there develops really this hatred between these two groups of people. And if you think back to the proclamation line, it's almost like in 1763, Britain kind of pauses and they realize, oops, we shouldn't have left Native Americans out. And they even contemplated having like a Native American state. But as you know, in 1763, this really starts major conflict between the colonists and Great Britain, and Britain's going to be dealing with their own problems with the colonists. They're not going to be able to set up a Native American state. And if you look at this map too, you can see that after the French and Indian War, which ends in 1763, that Britain is going to realize we left Native Americans out, and this is where Pontiac's rebellion along this entire line, they will constantly be attacking because they've been left out of the peace treaty. They're not really treated as equals, and you see all this further land is going to be claimed, going to be gained by Britain. And you will see that the Spanish will gain this land. Again, you see no area for Native Americans to go, and they're just going to be constantly pushed westward. And you had some Seminoles that were down in Florida that will now be gained by Great Britain and eventually by the United States. And in this fighting down here, you will see a man that's going to be known for his fierce hatred of Native Americans and his fighting style, and that's going to be Andrew Jackson, who will be president when the Trail of Tears, well, actually the Indian Removal Act is initiated, and then eventually Andrew Jackson will become president in 1828, and a lot of people are, thinking he really is well known for his hatred of Native Americans. Let's see what he does as president. You see that this pushing westward will really dwindle the Native American population to 125,000. Let's compare that to the non-Indian population, which was at 13 million. So if you can kind of see here, this is where all of these tribes are being pushed further back. And again, it's like all Native Americans aren't the same. They have different tribes. They have different allies, different enemies, and they're going to be pushed further westward. So you can see here, 13 million whites to 125,000 Native Americans. Wow, what a huge ratio. Very hard for the Native Americans to really come up against that. What do you think of when you think of Native Americans in the early 1800s? Hopefully you're thinking about those presentations that you gave and you heard from others about culture and way of life and housing. And again, each one is different, and it doesn't necessarily mean that white civilization is better. And just to give you an example though, the Cherokee actually lived in cabins. They didn't have the stereotypical teepee, and they began to dress more European, and they even adapted to many of the white man's farming and building methods. Some even owned plantations, and yes, some even owned slaves. So the Cherokee, they're really an example of Native Americans trying to do anything and everything they could to survive and to be accepted in this American culture. And you can guess it, they're not going to be accepted. And really, part of that non-acceptance is whites are not going to like Native Americans to be successful. They're not going to like them to be better than they are. So, for example, in Cherokee land, gold is found. Oh my goodness, then whites are going to have to take Native American land so they can get that gold. And they wanted this Native Americans to be removed so they can farm the rich land and dig for gold. And many of you can predict, what do you think is going to happen? Who's going to end up getting the land? You guessed it. Andrew Jackson, he felt that removing Native Americans from their land would be an opportunity to, number one, provide for white farmers and businessmen, but also he thought it was in their best interest. He thought that if Native Americans were really left, for example, in Georgia, that people would just go on their lands and whites would just hurt them and take their land. So he thought it's in your best interest. So you get this idea that Britain really pondered of having this reservation. Now, it would be a really great idea to have like a Native American state during this time period, but you can guess again what's going to happen in the future. They will find the land on the reservation will have some value, and then they'll be pushed off the reservation. So many of you guys know and understand the future really of what's happening, what will happen for Native Americans in American history. Here's what Andrew Jackson said to Native Americans. Where you now are, you and my white children are too near to live each other to live in harmony and peace. Your game is destroyed by white people, and many of your people will not work until the earth. Beyond the great river Mississippi, where part of your nation has gone, your father has provided a country large enough for all of you, and he advises you to remove to it. There, your white brothers will not trouble you. They will have no claim to the land, and you can live upon it. It will be yours forever. Oh my gosh. What a great idea, but as you guys also know, it's not going to happen, but this is what Andrew Jackson said. And again, we have hindsight, but all of what we know about Andrew Jackson in history is that he was just, again, pushing them westward, and there was really no attempt by the government to make sure that whites would stay out of Native American land. Again, here's a picture of Andrew Jackson saying, can't you see I'm doing this really for your own good? And Native Americans thinking, you got to be kidding me. Most of the Native American leaders were convinced. Again, they were thinking and making choices that they had to adapt to white ways. And many of them that did that were known as the 5 civilized tribes. And here you can see examples that you can write down of the 5 civilized tribes. And they're saying, no, we really want to stay in these lands that we have historically been in. We don't want to move westward. We can live in peace and harmony. And they're really trying to avoid removal. So this is what they did. They adopted a farming lifestyle. They received formal education. They had a written education, a written language. They established a newspaper. They adopted the white man's ideas. It's not going to be good enough. They're not going to be accepted. It didn't make any difference to the state of Georgia. And to them, because of their blood makeup, because of who they were still seen as, quote, savages. And they thought they had too much land. Specifically, they had too much gold that whites coveted. Congress passes, when Andrew Jackson is president, the Indian Removal Act, and you see that after this is passed that all the 5 civilized tribes, except for the Cherokee, are going to give up and move to Indian Territory in what is now Oklahoma. But the Cherokee decided to fight back politically and legally. John Ross, he was the principal chief in 1828. He was part Cherokee, spoke English, and learned the law. Between 1830 and 1838, he made many trips to Washington and pleaded the tribe's case again to Congress. He realizes that is not going to work, and so then he will turn to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we have a very famous court case, Worcester versus Georgia, and the Cherokee will sue the government of Georgia for taking their land. The Cherokee Nation said, State of Georgia had no legal authority to pass laws concerning the Cherokee Nation, a nation recognized through treaties with the United States. And they were exactly right. George Washington's administration, our first president, set up this idea that Native Americans were a separate foreign nation and that each tribe had to be, their land had to be negotiated for. And the Cherokee said, we have negotiated for this land. We have this, this land is already ours. What do you think the Supreme Court said? Who did the Supreme Court rule in favor of? And the Supreme Court will rule actually in favor of the Cherokee Nation. They said, yes, the Cherokee Nation is a sovereign, politically independent state, and the state of Georgia has no jurisdiction over the Cherokee Nation. Oh my goodness, there's one for the Native Americans. But guess what? Georgia ignored the court's ruling, and President Jackson sided with Georgia. He absolutely refused to enforce the Supreme Court ruling. And he even is famously quoted saying, well, John Marshall, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, has made his decision, now let him enforce it. So technically, this guy should have been impeached. Why wasn't he? Most of the people supported him and really his ideas specifically for Indian removal. And again, some of his critics, though, did call him King Andrew. And he goes, I know I'm not really the king, but we're pretty much going to do things the way I say because I know best. And in his way, it was to move Native Americans westward where they would be safe. In 1838, though, this is after Jackson is out of power, though, just so you understand, Martin Van Buren is president. The Georgia militia, they were ordered to force the Cherokee Nation out of Georgia. And General Winfield Scott and U.S. Army came to move them. They are going to be walking. They are going to get to walk all the way to a reservation in Oklahoma. 17,000 Cherokee. They were brutally rounded up. They had to leave everything they had. Homes and things like that are going to be quickly taken over by whites, and they are supposed to go now to Oklahoma. And you can see that's going to be quite a trek they are making. And again, you have the U.S. Army doing it and forcibly moving them. Many Cherokee ran away. They were unwilling to walk with their white enemies. Some of those who tried to escape were caught. Others of them made it to freedom. And those who did not escape had to make the travel or they were killed. Snow fell and the wind whistled. They still had to walk, so they did. They walked all day and slept in the open at night. And you will also see that many white settlers along the way are going to take things from them. They're going to be like taunting them. It really wasn't a pretty thing. It really wasn't something that anyone would want to do. Many of them got sick. They were left to die. And you will see again, if you just look at the specifically at the numbers, 4,000 of them died. About 1 in 4 who started on the journey died from the horrible conditions, illnesses, and starvation. Most of you guys know this long and terrible walk was known by those that experienced the trail where they cried, and it's commonly called the Trail of Tears. Here is a very famous painting of the Trail of Tears. This actual picture, don't tell anyone, is actually going to be on your final, and you will have a constructive response specifically about the Trail of Tears. So it's good that you are watching, understanding, and taking notes. Also, under our Google community, you will need to hit the quizzes, and I want you to take a short quiz on this video.